give you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain today and talk about something that's kind of interesting that happens periodically when I start to do one of my videos. Before I do that, let me tell you that the video for today is going to be called The Perfect Leader. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt, and today is Thursday, the 14th of October, 2021. Welcome to everyone who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube. Remember, Rumble is my preferred platform. Today, as I say, the subject is going to be perfect leader, the perfect leader. But what I want to start by saying is this. Sometimes, lots of times, when I start down the road of doing a video, I find out that I have some things to bring to the video that I didn't even realize I had to bring when I started working on creating it. And today, that's something that happened. I ended up going down a path, and the path that I went down, which I'll go through in my notes very quickly, might help you to see some things that you don't really think about very much when you think about the idea of the perfect leader. That said, let me go ahead and go through my notes so that you can hear what it is I had to say. Is it possible for there to be a perfect leader? Not to me. One can talk about someone like George Washington, but even if you ignore things like the existence of slavery, which I sort of argue is necessary, I kind of think you have to argue about ignoring that, you still have to deal with the fact that Washington chose to step down. The question should be, or would be, why? Was it because he was concerned over what he might become if he were vested with even long-term, much less more or less permanent power? Regardless the reason, Mr. Washington was clear on one thing. He wasn't going to stay in office for a long period of time. What does that have to do with anything? If he chose not to do so, and it was made the law of the land over the course of time that others must do likewise, that means, in my opinion, in my view, nobody could take the mantle of leadership for long. You can argue that law was a bad idea. But let me point something out. In just about every country around the world not run by despots, the idea has been adopted as their model as well. Do you suppose that was by accident? I don't think so. And let's be clear. All of those entities took on that idea relatively recently. In fact, it can be fairly said that almost all modeled themselves on the way the United States does business. That means the chances are good, even if you happen to get a relatively good leader, nothing like perfect to be sure, you're going to, quote, lose him or her in relatively short order. Do you find one president particularly hapless? I think pretty much everybody does, right? I don't need you to indicate or even think about which one it was. If you do, you've proven to me there's pretty much always a chance for there to be a bad one, a bad president, a bad leader. The final idea in my notes today is this. Even if you manage to find a leader that appears to do it all correctly, something I don't think will ever happen, and definitely not as everyone looks at things, he or she will die. Short of having an immortal, all good, all righteous, benevolent leader like God, you're pretty much out of luck in the long term. All right, again, that's the end of my notes. So let me go ahead and step into this discussion. I wanted to say that one of the things that I hadn't even really considered is this. The perfect leader would pretty much have to be around for as long as you needed them to be around. And unless you're going to tell me that you don't need a leader to stay around in the long term, then the fact that that leader is going to die, unless it happens to be God we're talking about, means that you can't really count on having a perfect leader for a long period of time. That's just not going to happen. So even if you could manage to get a really good leader, forget perfect for just a minute, let's just settle for really good. Even if you could manage to get a really good leader, though, what that means is the chances are good at some point or other they're going to have to step down. And what makes that worse is it turns out that a lot of people, when they get in positions of power, become entrenched in their positions and become people that you wouldn't give a nickel for over 4 or 5 or 6 or however many years it happens to be. I can't think of somebody who didn't step down from a position of power who that wasn't true for in some measure and in some degree. And if nothing else, they sort of lose their grip on things a lot of times. They become ensconced in their ivory tower and they lose their grip on things. So in the long term, the idea of a perfect leader or even a good leader is just not a really good idea. It's not one that's likely to happen. Now, again, you argue there's a God. You argue that those of us who believe in that God consider him to be the perfect leader, yet he's eternal. Well, that's, to me, an entirely different thing. To be frank with you, among other things, frankly, he is supernatural. He is above that which is natural, which means he's outside of the fray. And that makes it so that he doesn't have a lot of the shortcomings that the average person on planet Earth is going to have, right? But the point is really very simple. When it comes right down to it, your job isn't to find the perfect leader because you're not going to. That's not going to happen. You're not going to find the perfect leader. I'm sorry to tell you that. If you happen to believe that it's true, you're mistaken. And so there are a couple of things, and I wanted to say that this whole thing was brought on by something Dinesh D'Souza said about Madison's view compared to, I think it was Dante's view, about what it would take to make a perfect leader. I think it was Dante, I think that's who it was, who said a perfect leader is all-powerful and holds all of the reins, sort of thing. And Madison, I think it was, said, no, there is no such thing as a perfect leader, and the result is that if you don't defray, if you don't diffuse power, what you're going to have is a situation where you will have, there will be some individual or some group of individuals who will take the reins and won't want to let him go, even though they're anything but perfect in their leadership. And I largely, if not totally, agree with that idea. I think this idea of splitting things up in terms of what kinds of powers a person has, legislative, judicial, executive, as an example, right? I think the idea of checks and balances where one person can't just overrun the others without people making sure that they're doing what they need to be doing who aren't necessarily part of their little branch or section of how things are going on. I think that's a good thing. I think people stepping down after a given period of time. I think people being over a certain age and therefore having certain experience and just various things help to make better leaders. But I just have to tell you, look, if I told you who I thought was a really good president, you may think, no, that guy was an idiot, he was a loser, and I would never support that person as a president, much less have them come back if they had the ability to do so. And I might look at the person who you chose as the best of the lot and say, I can't believe you chose so-and-so as the best president. And that goes for Congress people, people in the Senate and people in the House of Representatives. That goes for judges. That goes for everybody. So the idea is, even if I could talk about what I thought was a perfect leader, that doesn't mean when you look at that individual, you would say the same thing. And then again, like I say, just to assume for a second that we can agree on a perfect leader, and now remember that person, unless it happens to be God Almighty, and as Dan Bongino has been fond of saying, I do not use his name in vain. Unless it happens to be God Almighty, sooner or later, he's going to die. He or she. And that's going to be the end of that. So that's kind of what I wanted to try and get across today. This idea of a perfect leader, of perfect people, I'm not really looking for that. I'm looking for the best I can get, and I'll acknowledge that, but I'm not looking for perfection. All right, I need to go ahead and wrap up. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt. Today is Thursday, the 14th of October of 2021. That means we're coming ever closer to the weekend. Tomorrow will be Friday the 15th of October of 2021. the beginning of the Sabbath for a lot of folks who believe it will be, I guess, on sundown on that day. Thank you for everyone who's been here on Rumble on the podcast on YouTube. Remember that Rumble is my preferred platform. You can give me a boxing glove or a plus on Rumble. That would be a positive feedback. And if you feel the need to do so, you can also give me the minus sign or negative feedback there as well. You can give me a thumbs up or a like or a thumbs down or a dislike on YouTube. That would be positive and negative feedback if you choose to do that. Remember that you can comment on any platform that comments are available, and I'll do my best to look that over. Subject for today has been the perfect leader. Tomorrow's subject will be more on masks. And this is actually something that came from my getting back in society in certain ways. I'm not going to say where at the moment. I may decide to embrace that a little more tomorrow. Hope that everything is going well for you. I hope that your day is a good one and that you're doing well in general. And hopefully we will see you again on Friday's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on Thursday, October the 14th of 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.